This is the School Success Podcast, a podcast for school leaders to learn from other school leaders what's working and what's not, and to get inspiration and encouragement, as well as strategies to grow school enrollment, connect with families, retain teachers, recruit teachers, and everything in between. You guys are heroes, and I cannot thank you enough for pouring into this next generation that's coming behind us. My goal is you will take at least one thing away from every episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. Please enjoy the School Success Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the Herzog Foundation.
Time for school.
Hey, School Success Makers. Welcome to another edition of the School Success Podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Slater. I'm joined by a friend out of the great state of Missouri, Kristie Stoddard, who is the head of school of Headington Hill Classical Academy in Springfield, Missouri. And I've actually known her for a couple years now. We get connected through Herzog stuff. I met her in person at another Herzog event, and just really appreciate her and her leadership and what she's done with starting this school and what they're doing. And so I was like, Kristie, we got to have a podcast about this. And so here we go. A couple years later, we're finally hopping on and getting to know more about Headington Hill and what they're doing there in Missouri. But before we jump into all that fun stuff, I'm going to pass it off to Kristie to introduce herself. So Kristie, welcome to the podcast today.
Hello, Mitchell. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to finally connect and be able to do this podcast with you. It's funny how often we also ran into each other, not just at Herzog, but at the College of the Ozarks.
That's right.
At their classical thistle training, I think it was, classical educator training. But so I am, like you said, Kristie Stoddard. I have been the headmistress and founder of Headington Hill. This is our third year. And so we are relatively new, but I have been in classical education since 2007. I was homeschooling my oldest children prior to that with classical Charlotte Mason pedagogy prior to formally joining the classical movement. So I read a lot of books about classical education, and I had a lot of ideas about what I wanted to do with my children and how to disciple them for Christ. And that has kind of led into this whole starting of the school. I worked for lots of years with various classical education programs, homeschool and like online schools and in-person schools. And so one of my favorite roles in all of my different hats with classical education was mentoring parents, mentoring families and helping them to know how to educate their children, and believing that God uniquely equips parents to know their children and to interact with their kids and engage with them and help them to learn to know God. And so when the idea for the school first came to me, I really felt like it was the culmination of all of these different paths. And it was actually in the context of a conversation with another family and helping them trying to figure out, looking at all the different possible schools in town and what they could do. And they said, you should start a classical school. And it's like, oh no, you've got options. And these are the options. And at that point, it felt like God was going, donk, donk, donk. And I'd had that same conversation before, but never with the feeling of, hey, listen up. And so I started praying over the next month about that, and went and met with a friend of mine that we graduated from college together, and he is a not-for-profit lawyer. And I was like, hey, if I was to incorporate, what would I do? What should it be like? And within a week of that conversation, we had a facility. I had a board, including a lawyer and an accountant. I had 3 families. And so it was like, we just hit the ground running, and it's been an adventure ever since.
Wow, what a story. And I love when that's a 100% a God story too, because you're like, I don't know about this, and God's like, here's the door and it's wide open, go on through it. So that's exciting. I love that. Well, I'm excited to jump into, I've obviously got some questions for you today about the school. Before we jump into all those, I always have a fun question I ask everybody before we jump in. And this is fun actually, because I have been to Springfield before, but I have only flown into Springfield and then drive right to the Ozarks for that conference. So I've actually never explored Springfield. So here's my question for you. I ask everybody the same one, is if I was to visit you guys in Springfield, Missouri, what would you say, Mitchell, you need to eat this and do this to experience Springfield, Missouri?
So local lore has it that, and I think it's actually true, not just lore, but true. Springfield, Missouri is the home of sweet and sour chicken. Like we had somebody locally developed it for an American palate. So it's a kind Chinese option for people who aren't fully into the Chinese option. So sweet and sour chicken, that's Springfield. That's something you have to eat. What were the other two things? I started thinking about that, and sorry, I wasn't listening.
So eat this, and do this. So what would I need to do?
Oh,
Like,
and
what's something cool to do around Springfield?
something cool to do, or something that's Springfieldian?
I would say Springfieldian. Like, what's something you're like, you got to do this if you're visiting Springfield. You got to do this.
Okay, probably Bass Pro. We have the flagship Bass Pro. It was started. Bass Pro shops were started in Springfield, Missouri. So that would probably be the most Springfieldian thing to do.
That's a good one. That's a
Yeah.
perfect one. Perfect. Well, thank you. All right, Bass Pro, and go get some chicken. I like it. So not sweet and sour. Is that what you said? Sweet and sour chicken.
Yeah, sweet and sour chicken. Yeah.
Love it. All right.
Or
Well,
maybe no. Oh, I totally said it wrong. Not sweet and sour. Oh, cashew chicken. It's cashew chicken. Oh my goodness. I'm not a native Springfieldian, so you can excuse me for not having that right. Cashew chicken.
Okay.
That's Springfieldian, not sweet and sour. Ugh.
I'm sure there's all these people listening going, I don't know what she's talking about. What is she talking about? All right.
He's wrong. He's not from Springfield.
So I'm going to get some cashew chicken. I'm going to go to Bass Pro, look at all the guns and fishing stuff at Bass Pro Shop. And that's a full Springfield, Missouri tourist attraction. I love it.
Yep, there it is.
So for your school, you kind of went over a little bit about the school, the background, a little bit the story, but I'd love to kind of just dive into that a little bit more. Also about the growth. I know you guys are in year 3, I think you had said. So like, what does that look like when you had those 3 flagship families that were like in a week, like, yeah, let's do this. Like going from where you started to kind of where you guys are today. Let's dive into that a little bit before I got some more questions I'll ask you on that.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So with those 3 families, I started just doing informational meetings pretty quickly right out of the bat, meeting with a lot of groups of organizations like churches and homeschool groups and things, just trying to get our name out there. And actually, can I tell you the meaning of our name, of our school? It's one of my favorite
Please.
stories. So Headington Hill, and this really goes into our vision statement, which I'm probably totally jumping the gun here, but I'm going to tell you this anyway, because I have to define my terms because I'm classical, right? So the vision of anybody's vision is a snapshot of a clear and preferable future. Your mission is how you get there, and your core values is the daily acting out of that mission and vision. So our vision at Headington Hill Classical Academy it's a Milton quote, and it's the chief end of education is to repair the ruin of our first parents, thereby regaining to know God aright, and out of that knowledge to love him, to imitate him, to be like him, as we may the nearest by possessing our souls of true virtue, which, when united with the heavenly grace of faith, makes up the highest perfection. So that's that, repairing that fall, that ruin, getting to know God through his general revelation, right? And so that's the purpose of education, is to know God as much as we can, and through his general revelation, and then the specific studies as well. But so C.S. Lewis got on the bus at the bottom of Headington Hill, which is a road in Oxford, England, and he was an atheist. And when he got off the bus at the top of the hill, he was a theist. That was not his conversion moment, but in that moment, he had this epiphany that it is intellectually satisfying to believe that there is a God. And that was his first step in conversion. And so it's that metaphor of that bus ride towards knowledge of God. So that's why we're called Headington Hill. But anyway,
love that.
Thank you. Yeah, we're pretty intentional about all the little things that makes it more fun for me, I think. But so we started off with 24 students our first year at the beginning of the year, and we ended with 34. So we had quite a few join at semester. Then our second year, we had about 82 or 84. I'm throwing in all the fours, 80 something. And then this year we're just under 100 at 98, I believe. And so, yes, so we are growing fairly rapidly. And that was especially from year 1 to year 2 was such a huge leap. That was really scary. And that it made me really very quickly implement a lot of, I guess, protocols and procedures for how to interview families, what questions to ask, because I really wanted to maintain this very infant culture that we were developing, and I didn't want, by exploding too fast, for the culture to go sideways. And so that became like almost a crisis for me. Like, how am I going to, with all of this interest, I don't want to just say yes to everybody. I want to make sure that we are going to meet their expectations and that we are a good fit for what they are actually wanting. And so I had to really come up with lots of interview questions. And so we do interview families. That's the first step towards preserving our culture. Is interviewing the families and making sure that they align with our methods and what we want to do, our philosophy and pedagogy, and that we will meet their expectations, that we're able to do what it is they're looking for.
Hey, school success makers, Mitchell here. I just want to take a really quick break from the show to give a big, huge shout out to the Herzog Foundation. I absolutely love the Herzog Foundation. I've been friends and partners with them for a couple years now, but we're bringing it to a whole new level. And I'm excited to share that our very own School Success podcast is now featured on the Herzog Foundation Podcast Network. The Herzog Foundation is a powerhouse of resources designed to support schools like yours, from free training events through the Herzog Foundation Institute to their incredible online news publication, The Lion, and of course, our new podcast, Home. They have everything you need to stay informed and inspired. And if you're dreaming of starting your own Christian school or co-op, don't miss their online course, Schoolbox. It's a fantastic resource to help you get started on the right foot. At School Success, we're proud to partner with the Herzog Foundation to bring you these valuable tools and insights. So visit herzogfoundation.com to explore all they have to offer. Trust me, you won't want to miss out on these amazing opportunities for growth and success. And I love all the people over there, and I know you guys will too. So please go check them out, and you won't be disappointed. Now, back to the show. What does an interview look like for you guys? Is that something where will they come in? Do you even let them tour first and then do the interview? Is interview literally the first thing you guys have them do?
No, we do a tour first, and I conduct probably 98% of the tours. I want to get to meet the families right off the bat, get to know them, kind of get a feel for where they are, where they're coming from, what they're looking for. So the tour is in of itself an informal interview. It's just a way to present who we are. I give a short presentation on what classical education is, what the actual pedagogy of it looks like at Headington Hill, and what we focus on with our core values and our vision and our mission, and answer questions. And so, yes, the space, the way I organize the tours, I walk through the schedule of the day, and interwoven throughout that is our core values. And so walking them through the schedule helps them see what a day looks like. We let them peek into classrooms. And then after that, if they're interested, then they can apply. And part of the application process is the interview. They have a checklist of things they need to complete.
Okay. What inside that interview? I think that's a great thing you guys are doing. I know not every school does that. So for those listening, going, "Oh, I'd love to do an interview," what are some of the key pieces you would say, "Hey, you need to include this in an interview"? I'm sure you have changed it over the last 3 years. Like, "Oh man, I need to ask this now. This was helpful to know." What are some of those things you would say you need to have in an interview?
The very first thing, and actually I do mention this in the tour, is that they need to be able to say that they agree with our statement of faith, because that is the foundation of who we are. And if we are not aligned on our faith statement, then we're probably not going to meet expectations in either direction. And so that's the first thing. Then the next thing I ask is, I start off by giving just a brief statement of my relationship with God, like my faith journey. And so then I ask the parents, and then if they're high schoolers, I ask them to share with me as well, if they're comfortable. And then I try to engage the students, because we have the whole family come. And so I engage the children as well, just whatever age appropriate questions that I can ask them to get to know them, but also to know where they are in their faith journey. Not that we expect all of the children to have accepted Christ, because it's a process. And we're not going to say, "Oh, if you're 12 years old, you have to have asked Jesus into your heart." That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for a family culture that is really centered on Christ, and where we're trying to disciple our children, and the parents are engaged in that. And so also one thing that's important to say is we are a hybrid or collaborative model. We meet 2 days a week for K through 6. And then there's an optional third day, and then 7 and up 3 days a week. And so they have part of their time at home. And so the parents, because of that, there has to be so much more of a strict alignment in our goals and our values than if we were just a 5-day-a-week school. Now, we do allow families, we don't have any denominational affiliation specifically. We meet in an Anglican church, and we were initially formed under 𝒊𝒔𝒄𝒂𝒊𝒏𝒈 Communities, which is an online 𝒊𝒔𝒄𝒂𝒂𝒊𝒏𝒈 Academy, and they're publisher of classical academic press as their publishing house. And they provide administrative support a little bit initially when you're starting, but to be a community with them, all you have to do is be classical, Christian, and 𝒊𝒔𝒄𝒂𝒊𝒏, which is restful. Simplistically. And so they have 3 houses in their classical school, and so one of them is the Protestant would be like the Anglican house. And so, but we have everybody from all walks of Christian faith in our school, and so we consider ourselves ecumenical. And so our statement of faith is the Nicene Creed and 3 social statements, and so families would need to agree to that. Those are the tenets that we hold in a tight fist that we must all agree on. And then the doctrinal issues with younger children, those are things then that we refer them back to their parents and their church. With older students, those are things we actually engage in. Like for example, we have several Catholic families, and then we almost had a Greek Orthodox family. I'm a little sad they didn't come because it's so interesting to talk about the different doctrinal differences. But if you believe that transubstantiation, so taking communion, if you believe that this becomes miraculously the body and blood of Christ, how does that affect your daily acting out of your faith, and should it? And if you don't believe it, how does that affect your daily acting out of your faith, and should it? What is the difference? How does that, what are the strings that go back to that doctrinal idea, to the core beliefs that we have? And let's engage them and talk about them.
I love it, man. All right, so this is good. I love the makeup of what you guys have had. I love that there's been continued growth each and every year that you guys have done this. So kudos, good job. Keep up the good work with what you guys are doing. I know a lot of this, you kind of already mentioned it, comes down to the mission vision, which I love the mission vision you shared there. And there's obviously core values that are a part of that. You mentioned that when you're in the tour process, you're sharing some of those. How do you kind of talk through those, or what are those core values that you guys live out, that you are, and I guess how are you intertwining those into the daily life at the school?
Right, that's a good question. So the very first core value is 𝒊𝒔𝒄𝒂𝒊𝒏, which is Greek for leisurely or restful, which does not mean that we are easy. We are still definitely rigorous, and we want to ask our students, ask more of them, ask them to ask more of themselves and their texts, so that they can really just glean as much as they can from their education, and really take deep dives. What 𝒊𝒔𝒄𝒂𝒊𝒏 means is that we are providing the space for them to go deeply within each of their texts. And so rather than reading, 20 novels in a literature class, we want to read 4, 1 per quarter, because we want to make sure that we're not reading like Frankenstein in 2 weeks and just barely, skimming the surface. We don't want to go wide at the sake of going deep. Now, the younger grades, I always say that, and then I always give this as a caveat. The younger grades, reading is a skill that they're working on, and classical education is in part the acquisition of the skills of learning from Dorothy Sayers' Lost Tools of Learning essay. And so we want to make sure that we are providing enough opportunity for the skill of reading. So in the lower grades, up through about 4th or 5th, they are reading a lot of books, but that's different from a literature class in which we're discussing themes and characters and plot and hero's quest and all of those things. And so we want to make sure, though, that they have that time to interact and ask really good questions of the text and themselves, to engage with the big ideas. And so we do that by making sure that we have fewer books, which is really hard because I love books. And I always have this tension where it's like, oh, but I want to expose them to this and this and this. And then I have to reel myself in. And it's like, but if we teach them to love learning, then they'll explore all those on their own. And so we've really got to just pick we want to pick what's good and beautiful and true. We try to focus on those things. I believe the Greeks taught us that, pathos, logos, and ethos are what comprise the human soul. And beauty is what draws our souls to goodness and truth. And so we want to make sure that ever before our students, we have beauty to draw them to truth and to draw them to Christ and goodness. And so, so Skole is making sure that we provide that space for them to go deeply into all of their subjects. The next core value, did you want me just to list all the core values?
Yeah, please go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was Skole. So then the next one is liturgical. We believe that the rhythms of worship, there's like kind of two sides to this rhythm of worship coin, but like initially, the rhythms of church really do apply well to an academic setting. And so, first of all, it's that beauty. We come to Christ first through worship by song and visual arts. And so we start off our day with morning recitations. We have a catechism that we say, we sing it, we do a hymn study, our pledges, and we go into morning prayer with the church. We have a morning prayer time with our church, and then they go back to their classrooms and have artist study and composer study. So they're listening to classical music and studying an artist. And so that's the beauty element that hopefully whets their appetite for learning for the day and points them to Christ. Also, though, it's because we're hybrid, that gather and scatter. You gather with your community and then you scatter back out, or you gather with your church community and then scatter back out into your neighborhoods and in order to bring the gospel and share the gospel. And so our students come together for community days and then back into their homes and neighborhoods for the other days. And so those are the kind of the rhythms. We make sure that we have reflection time in our classes, and we end with a benediction at the end of the day. All the students line up in the hallway and we sing the doxology. So we want to make sure that we are bookending with our focus on Christ. And then our next core value is embodied, just that we are whole humans and that we are educating for being rather than for doing. Doing is part of, like Mortimer Adler, the three columns. We've got that knowing, that doing, and that being. And so doing is a part of the road, but we don't end at doing, we end at being. And so we want to make sure that we're engaging their minds to know God and make him known, their hearts to love God and love their neighbors, and their hands for service. And so we make sure that everything that we do is intentional about engaging the embodied human. Then we have rightly ordered. This one was not those. So those were the three core values that we started off with our first year. Halfway through our second year, I realized every single thing I did, I was looking at through the lens of ordinate love, from Augustine's City of God. One of his books is called Ordinate Love. And he talks about if we rightly order our affections and love the creator rather than the created things, then everything falls into place. We kind of in the Protestant world, we talk about Jesus, others, you, or God, family, work. We have all of these different ways of thinking about that, but they all really have the same thing, is that we have to rightly order our affections, and that helps us answer so many questions for our children. I remember one of my daughters, prior to when we added this, but I had just revisited City of God after several years, and this was really, the Holy Spirit was really working on me through this chapter. And one of my daughters, her older sister is 10 years, her next oldest, we have 6 kids. Her next oldest sister is 10 years, so there's some brothers in between and a gap. And she had asked if she could watch Dance Moms with her sister. I was like, oh, that's so sweet that they want to bond over that, but I'm not comfortable with that. And I was like, no, I don't know why. I'll get back to you on why, but the answer right now is no, because I'm not comfortable with it. So I started thinking about, does it teach her to love that which is lovely? And so that's the question I always think about. Does it teach them to love that which is lovely? And the answer was no, it doesn't. And so we try to approach that with all of our curriculum choices. Does it teach us to love that which is lovely? Everything that we do, we're looking at that. It also helps us answer ethics questions. Rahab, she lied. She broke one of the 10 Commandments, but in Hebrew, she's in the Hall of Fame of Faith, that Faith Hall of Fame. And why? And it was her lying is because she rightly ordered her affections. She feared and loved God most. She wanted to be known as a child of God. She wanted to know him. And so his valuing him most, and then human life next, and then truth next. And so she was able to rightly order her affections. And so that helps her answer an ethical question, an ethical dilemma. And then the last one is family-centric, and we just added that one at the tail end of last year. And that's kind of a duh, obviously, since we're hybrid. Like, well, I guess maybe we should enunciate it, that everything that we do focuses on the family. And so the way we have our curriculum set up even helps parents. We have, if you have never read Teaching from Rest by Sarah Mackenzie, I always recommend that to everybody. We have our morning time that all of our kids K through 12 do the exact same thing. So if a family has 6 kids, or 2, they can start their morning time out together with their Bible, hymn, study, composer, artist, all of that together, and even Latin memory work can all be together. And then they can branch off into do grade-specific things. But that way you've got that family time. And then we have by grade and skill and the skills that we're trying to master. I was like, skills. I was thinking skill level. Skills that we try to master by grade and by skills. We list out what the prioritize are for each of the families. And so in lower grades, it's always reading, writing, arithmetic, and as they get older, there's different skills that they're focusing on. So those become the prioritized, and then everything else would be on the loop, which as they get older and older, there's hardly anything on the loop. But that allows the family to have better rhythms, and this goes into the liturgical element as well, having rhythms of their day, that because the day at home is never, the homeschool day is never going to be the same every 2 days. It's mostly interruptions, and so giving them a way to not feel like they're always behind the curveball is super helpful.
Man, there's a lot there. So I have one specific question and all of that.
Okay.
One, obviously, I love all of it. And a lot of the schools that I've talked to over the years, like a lot of them don't have these components. Like they don't have it clearly defined, clearly written out. They're just kind of going through the motions. And so I'm sure that we have somebody listening right now and they're like, holy smokes, that was really good. Like they got it written down. They've only been around 3 years. They got this. And I think that's a testament to you and the school's growth as well. But if somebody's listening, wanting like where to start with that, what would you say, like, hey, to create core values, to create these pieces of like who you are as a school? I mean, do you recommend something specific for them to do that would get them to get what you kind of have gotten over these last couple of years?
Yes, yeah. I mean, first of all, you have to have your vision. You have to have your bullseye on the side of the barn. You need to know where you're headed. If you don't know where you're headed, you're not going to be able to discern what those core values are. So first of all, have a clearly defined vision. Your mission is how you get there. And so the mission and the core values work hand in hand, that the core values become the daily acting out. So if your mission statement has something to do, they're always going to be talking about education. But for me, I really don't think that excellent hear me out. I don't think that the acquisition of knowledge is the point of education. We don't have excellence in education as part of our core values or any of that, because it's about character formation. It's about knowing God, who he is, and how to live a life yielded to him so that we're living the abundant life. That is the goal. And that answers all the other questions. If we know that that is the goal, then how do we get there? It's learning to abide in Christ. Well, how do we learn to abide in Christ? It's spending time with him. It's praying. It's worshiping. And so how do we make the day worshipful when we're studying, science or physics or math or poetry? We point those subjects back to God, and we are always asking the question, what do I learn about the character of God in this poem? What do I learn about the character? So we're asking worldview questions in everything that we do. What do I learn about the character of God? What do I learn about the character of man? And what do I learn about the nature of sin? And so we ask there's a lot of worldview questions out there, but those are the 3 primary ones. Even the little kids, what do we learn? What did we learn about Johnny in this? He lied. What does that tell us about all of us? Is it easy to lie? Yes, it is. And so what do we learn about God in this? And so helping the students create a vision, giving them eyes to see and ears to hear, helping them practice recognizing how God is at work in the world around us is the core of education. So first start with your vision, and then figure out, how do you want to get there? What kind of school do you want to look like? There's a book, we read it for one of my trainings with Herzog. I think I never know what books I'm going to want to refer to, but is it The Storyboard?
Building the Story Brand by Donald Miller.
Yeah. Yes. I think that's really helpful as you're looking at how you're going to speak to who you are, you first have to define who you are and how you're implementing who you are. So that one was super helpful. I already had my core values in that, but I, for whatever reason, that book itself, it was really engaging, but it helped me hone in on how I'm communicating it and if I really actually am um, doing what I say I want to be doing in the school. And there's
Yeah.
hundreds of books there, but yeah.
Okay. Well, obviously, again, you thought this out. Thank you for sharing that, because I think there's people that are listening go, man, I want that, but I don't even know where to start. So yeah, so Kristie had mentioned everybody like the Building a Story Brand book by Donald Miller. Any of the stuff from Donald Miller is pretty darn good. So I encourage you to look at his books. He's written many, but Story Brand's a good one for creating that and getting a good foundation, a good start in that. Tons of resources around that book. And if, of course, those that are listening, one of our best sponsors of the podcast is the Herzog Foundation. And so if you guys are not connected with them, they offer free trainings and free support and free resources to Christian schools across the country that you can tap into. They're pretty awesome people over there. So go check them out as well. Well, Kristie, I know also one of the things of all this stuff you're doing is culture and building good culture. And we all know how quickly, how long it takes to build good culture, but how quickly it can be destroyed and ruined when a family that doesn't fit the values comes into play, or somebody who you'd be like, well, we need the tuition dollars, so we're just going to let this family come in. And then you're like, oh, we're paying for this now in the long run because people are leaving over this. And so culture is so important. And so I'd love you kind of speak into to the culture piece before we wrap it up today.
Yeah, that's so important. I think the first thing that's on my mind all the time when I'm interviewing families and when I'm engaging with families and even in discipline, and we try to focus on discipline not as punishment, but as an opportunity for growth. One of my favorite verses is a righteous man falls 7 times, but he gets back up. We are all going to sin. We're all going to mess up. And so using that as an opportunity for growth, helping the students recognize that they are not alone in their failures, and that they need to really focus on how do I overcome this? How do I make restitution? How do I make it better? And so that's the first thing, is making sure, first of all, that the families that you have do fit in. Don't here let me back up a little bit, and this is kind of my best piece of advice because it fits in.
Perfect.
I read this in a book. My husband's a church planner, and it was called The Church Planner's Wives when we were first going through training with the North American Mission Board. And there was one line in that book, and it said, the success or failure of your church, and I'll say school, is not up to you. It absolutely is not up to you. Your job is simply to obey God in this and to walk in obedience. And so that means, sometimes God's plan is for the school to be here to meet the needs of one family. Sometimes it's here to teach me something, for me to grow. And maybe God's plan is for it to fail. Maybe God's plan is for it not to go on past, 5 years or 10 years, because there's just a specific purpose in it. And so the success or failure is not of the school, is not a measure of the success or failure of you in your walk with Christ. Obedience is. And so I think back all the time when I'm interviewing families and disciplining, I think I am promising to my families a certain type of education. And if I allow this student to continue in this misbehavior, it's, is it really delivering on that promise? And I kind of come back to that question all the time. And if the answer is no, we have to make a change. And sometimes that means, usually it starts with a SMART plan, but often, not often, hasn't happened a lot, but it can mean dismissal. It can mean we are not, we thought we were aligned. It felt like it at the beginning, but Joey's just doesn't want to be here. So we need to, and it's a long process, of course, but we do have to not be afraid to say, my job is to obey and walk in obedience, and to follow my commitments to all of my families. And so I have to consider the school as a whole and the culture before I say yes to anybody. So never say yes based on money. Never say yes based on money. You trust God. And if you don't have enough money, then you're asking, what am I supposed to be learning in this? And giving God an opportunity to provide, trusting Him, holding it in an open hand. That's such an easy trap to fall into. And then also, I am a people pleaser by nature. Peacemaker, by Ken Sande, as the best book in the world. If you tend to be a people pleaser, it will teach you how you ought to engage people in truth. He has like this odometer, so in the center, it's also aligns very well with Aristotle's golden mean of virtue. But so the middle is peacemaking, and then you've got peace faking and peace breaking, which would be the vices of excess or deficiency on either side of truth telling. And so when you peace fake, you want to tell people what they want to hear, which is a form of trying to control them or manipulate them. And if you peace break, it's when you attack, you yell verbally, you're just mad, you let your emotions take over. So learning to tell the truth in love and say what needs to be said, it's a lot less painful in the long run if you just do it and say no when you need to say no. So, and that's hard. It's really hard for me. That's definitely a growing thing for me. Every time I have to say no to somebody, which I do say no quite a bit on allowing families into the school, it really is a niche group of people that would fit our school. There are lots of options, and we are not for everybody. And I know that, and I'm okay with that. I mean, a family can come and say, we thought this was going to be a good fit. We're not going to come back next year because actually we realized through this that there's something else we want. So absolutely, praise the Lord. Go and be happy. It's recognizing it goes both ways. So don't be afraid of saying no to people, and also making sure that you stick to what you're offering, what you tell families that you're providing.
Hey, I just want to take a really quick break from the podcast to highlight one of our amazing partners and sponsors, ClassReach. If you're a new school administrator or founder and are struggling to keep up with all the hassles of planting a new school, like collecting tuition, communicating with parents, or handling student data, then you need ClassReach. ClassReach is the all-in-one software that helps with everything from admissions and tuition to classroom management and parent communications. Sign up for a free consultation with one of their school specialists and see how ClassReach can help your school grow today. You guys can check them out online, classreach.com. They are a kingdom-minded company, and I love their leadership team there. I've become friends with a lot of them. They truly are a great company. I support them, and I love them, and you guys will love them too. Check them out at classreach.com. Now, back to the show. You're the first person that beat me to my last question. I mean, nobody in all my interviews, Kristie, you broke the record. Now you're the first one to say, "Hey, I'm going to give a piece of advice before you even ask for it." So I love it. You're the first one to be able to do that. I want to speak into what you said because I love that, and I think other people need to hear it again. And I'm going to say for the part of, I'm going to change it up just a little bit because this is like because I love it. So people think, well, God told me to do this thing. So just because God told me to do this thing means it is going to be successful. And I was like, man, it's not biblical. It's not how it works. God can do whatever he wants. And I remember this is back when I was a youth pastor up in Alaska. And when my wife and I felt like God was kind of just, our time was up and it was time to move on to something else. And we actually didn't even know what that thing was. We just knew we were supposed to move. And so I remember telling my senior pastor, I was like, hey, like this is what we're doing. And I was like, man, he's not going to be happy. And he was like, man, that's awesome. I love that, you're following God's call. And he was so supportive. And so he gave me some of the best advice that I've given to so many people afterwards. And I've shared it on the podcast before too, where he said, I want you to know this. If you move, which we moved to Florida, so like all the way across the country. And he's like, if when you move there, if things don't go great, if they like flop, you can't find a job or you can't, whatever ends up happening. And you feel like, oh my gosh, I have to move back. And let's just say, for instance, you do move back. He goes, I don't want you for a second to think that you heard wrong, that you weren't supposed to go down there. He goes, God will call people down to something, teach them something that they need to learn, and then call them right back or call them into something else. And so that was so good because when we did move to Florida, it did not go smooth at all. And I had those thoughts going like, did I hear wrong? Did I misinterpret what I was hearing? And so I had those thoughts, but those words of him came over me of like, no, like you did what you were supposed to do. And so somebody might be listening going, man, I started this school, which I just saw a comment literally yesterday from a person that started a school, and they're like, hey, I'm thinking about having to shut the school down mid-year. We lost some people. I don't know what to do. And they were like, sharing this. And I was like, man, I feel like my heart kind of broke for them because it's like, man, God that might be what his plan is. Maybe not. Like maybe the person, again, maybe is not doing a great job with it, and they're not following God's call. But man, for anybody who needs to hear that, like, God might be just bringing you through something because, man, he's got something super cool in store, but he needed you to learn that piece to be able to get you to do this next thing later on. And then add one more thing here, and then I'll let you, share any final thoughts here. But my pastor, he's also my mentor. He was saying, because a lot of times people will complain and be like, "Oh, this thing's going horrible, and this thing's going so bad, and I don't like it." And he's like, "Well, yeah, like God uses discontentment to move people and to get them to go into something else. And He tried to tell you a year ago your time was up and it's time to leave, and you stayed. And so yes, it's going to be painful and it's going to hurt because He's actually told you a year ago or whatever it was to go to the next thing, and you're not listening." And I was like, I needed to hear that time He told me that as well. So any thoughts or final thoughts on that one?
Yeah, no, I love what you had to say. It is so true, that we don't want to give up too soon. We want to persevere in obedience, and so finding that natural ending time. If you feel like God is moving and trying to move you onto something, like giving you that discontent, or things are failing, I would say always finish the race. So never quit in the middle. Finish out your commitment. For that year, whatever, even if it's limping along, even if it means moving your school into your living room because you have so few kids, whatever it is you need to do, you've made a commitment. Finish out your commitments, and then see where God leads after that, because it might just be like you said and I said. It's sometimes the point isn't the school, it isn't the success of it, and sometimes we won't know. Sometimes you'll go through something and it's an abysmal failure. You don't feel like you've learned anything out of it, and you didn't see it affect anybody else, so you're just thinking, well, that was weird. And you're trying to find meaning in it. Sometimes we won't know this side of heaven. We won't know this side, and that's okay. We have to be okay with letting God. Somebody said this recently, and I think it was a third person. Somebody told me that they heard it, so I don't even know exactly how it goes. But if you are pursuing God, if you are actively seeking Him and surrendered to Him and earnestly searching for what He wants you to do, you're gonna find it. You're in His will. You're not gonna mess up because you're earnestly seeking and listening. And sometimes it's just walking through the open doors, living the life that's right in front of you. That's from 𝒊𝒔𝒕𝒊𝒔𝒄𝒂𝒄𝒂𝒍, one of my favorite fictional books. It's a retelling of the story of David. The Samuel character tells the David character, which those aren't their names, but he, as you're preparing to be a king, because he's anointed as a child, David says, well, how do I do this? And he's like, well, live the life that's in front of you. Just live the life that's right before you. Keep walking in that direction and seeking God, and He will direct your path. So,
That's good.
Yeah.
Amen. Well, hey, Kristie, this has been fun. I just want to say, obviously, one, thank you for taking time out of your day to hop on a podcast. And two, thank you for following the call 3 years ago and jumping into this thing called starting a school. And you guys have done great with it. And I've enjoyed just getting to know you more and getting to meet you at the different events. So I'm assuming I'll probably see you at the Ozarks next year when I'm there again. And so keep doing what you're doing. And thank you again for your time today on the podcast. Well, another huge shout out and a thank you to Kristie for taking time and being on the podcast today. I love what they're doing up there in Missouri, and I'm wishing them nothing but the best as they continue to grow and educate the next generation that's coming behind us. And as always, I'm hoping you guys were able to take at least one thing away from today's episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. And obviously, one of the ways you guys can make yourselves better and more successful in your education journey is listening to the podcast like you're doing right now, because we are dropping episodes every single Monday morning. So make sure you're subscribed if you're not, so you don't miss out on any new episodes that come out. And if you love the content, I know you've heard this before, we would love a 5-star review. So just pause the episode real quick, 5-star review, boom, now back to listening to it. Wait, welcome back. All right, so that'd be awesome, because here, guys, we have 3 free resources available for you. And obviously the first one is the podcast, like I just mentioned. The second one is on our website. You can just go over to schoolsuccessmakers.com, and in the top right-hand corner, there is a button called the School Success Report. It's an email we send to you every single week, free of charge, with different articles either the team has written here at School Success or ones we have found online that we think would be helpful for you in your education journey. And we want to make sure you're getting that. We also do some teacher shout outs. We do some giveaways from time to time. So we want to make sure you're not missing out on those. So get that. Last but not least is our free private Facebook community called School Success Makers. If you're not a part of that, you're missing out as well. It's a pretty cool area to be in and get connected with other people in the education space. So go over and join that on Facebook. I'm personally in there and would love to see you in there as well. And then I think that's it. So we will be back here next week with another awesome guest as usual on the School Success Podcast. We'll see you then. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the Herzog Foundation.